I keep saying theater manager for 8 years of, I said, I can't even turn to the right place where the flag is since it moved. You can't expect me to immediately change the name of the position.
Everybody would please pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up is the Halloween debrief by Police Chief Summit. I assume you like the bands.
There's a lot of them.
Is
Just
that the
not the ones
subject of
at
this?
not the ones at Village Hall.
Oh,
I didn't catch those.
I thought that's the subject of this.
Obviously, everybody knows, I think most of you were at Halloween or around town, but with support from other agencies and village departments, we were able to close down Main Street at 5 o'clock for the Halloween festivities, as we had advertised ahead of time, and reopened it at approximately 9:45 once it was deemed safe to do so. The only street that remained closed a little bit later was North Ecker Street because of the late band that was playing there, and there was quite a crowd there. That was closed about 10:30, almost 10:45. All the other side streets were reopened. We brought in members from the Westchester County Department of Public Safety Emergency Force to assist with some traffic posts. We had our full day and night shift and some extra officers that were assigned. We also had Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which was staged right here in front of headquarters so they could get out. The fire department, which was staged at the Main Street School so they could respond immediately to any emergencies. And DPW, who assisted with barricades, cones, and trucks and personnel throughout the whole event, which ended up being very important because during the event we had a transformer blow and fire up on Sunnyside. We had to divert resources up there to direct traffic because the traffic light was out for about 2 hours until Con Ed could get there and fix it. So DPW, the fire department, and officers were up there trying to figure out the best way to do that. DPW tried to set up a couple signs for us, but it was getting too dark, so that wasn't going to work. So we had to physically direct traffic for about 2 hours during the event. Outside of that, we had the normal, few lost kids issues, few vehicle issues, things like that, but nothing too crazy. Parking, alternate parking that was set up ahead of time at the churches seemed to work out very well. Except people did park a little bit, all over the place. So it's something we're going to think about for next year. People also parked on South Broadway, past Main Street, on Broadway, essentially making it one lane to Station Road, which actually wasn't a bad thing because it slowed traffic down. So we let it happen after people started doing it. But it's just something that we're going to keep in mind for next year. We estimated the crowds to be, several thousand people like usual, just more dispersed and spread out because they had more real estate to work with, instead of just being stuck on the sidewalks and off the street. And one thing that we're thinking about for next year is instead of closing Main Street down at 5 because it was kind of light still then, probably closer to 5:30 or 6 even. Let people get, help people get home from work or out if they have to get out before closure, so shorten the closure time down. But outside of that, I heard a lot of people thought it went very well from what I've heard. They were pleased with the safety feature of having it closed down. I know some of you had mentioned that yourselves. So I think overall it's successful.
I got a question or two, and I hope I'm not preempting anybody else, but about the back end time, when you might consider, would you go to 9:30 or something, accepting obviously if you have Ecker or something where there are performances still ongoing, would you open it a little earlier?
It really dependent on the situation. So if you have like good weather, next year's gonna be on a Saturday. If you have good weather, it could easily go till 10. People will still be out and about. We reopened it 15-20 minutes sooner than we thought this year. We kind of like to keep it at 10, and then if we scale back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to change it to 9:30 and then keep it closed an extra half hour.
Got it.
Rather.
It seemed like it got a lot, much more dispersed around. It's like 9:30.
Right. Yeah. I think mostly everybody was kind of pushing over to North Ecker last band.
Can I ask a question about the Main Street lot parking? Because my notice was when I came in, I guess it was about 4 or 5. I was able to park at Main Street because I had some stuff for the van. But there were a whole bunch of spots that were coned off, not where the fire trucks were, but on the aqueduct side. And then when I went back to the car to leave, all those spots were taken. So were they temporarily blocked off? I'm not
No,
complaining. I'm just
that wasn't us.
That wasn't you?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the Main Street School itself?
Yeah,
Yeah, so unless it was for something, they were for the fire department's personal vehicle.
oh, and then once they were
I
done,
believe
left.
they had rope, yeah, because so the fire department members still have to respond and park somewhere to get to the fire truck. So I think they blocked
It
a
was
bunch
still
of
because
spots.
they had come to respond to the.
Right, because they had to go to this.
So if it had been transformable, they still would have been blocked off. Well, no, they would have been taken up by the, I understand.
Right,
That
so
makes
they had to
sense.
have open spots for the volunteers.
I was just
That's-
trying to understand.
And I don't know that's the fact, but I would imagine that.
The main reason I'm asking is just because at our, when the Halloween bands meet and everything, that's when these messages get out and everything.
Right.
And we were saying, oh, you can park in the Main Street lot, and we were able to. I think everyone got a spot that needed to. And so next year I would give a heads up that, the fire department takes up a big chunk of them.
Yeah.
So, think about other options, yeah.
One question about, on Ecker Street, that crowd was particularly large. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of ways to get out if there was like an emergency. Like the crowd was like sidewalk to sidewalk. Like I tried to navigate through it and I honestly gave up. I was concerned to like any of my concerts. Usually there's like some sort of avenue to get out for like emergencies. I don't know if there's any point of blocking it just because that crowd is particularly like overwhelmingly large.
Yeah, from what I heard, it was quite large at the end. Pretty much the whole street was full. That's why we kept that street completely closed off.
No, which I think is wise. I'm just thinking that many of the other streets have like another entry point on the other side, like either from one of the other private roads, and that one I don't think does.
No, there's no.
Just something to think about if there's some, like maybe some way we create like a safety path or something for like emergencies.
Did you get any complaints from Main Street residents?
I know
or-
this, I know what we could recommend.
No, no complaints. We had a few people that were trying to get out during the closure period that we obviously could not let out, and a few people trying to get in during the closure period that we didn't let in either. But mostly people would just turn right around and they understood. So and this was the first year, so there's an adjustment period.
I got so much positive feedback from people coming up to me and saying, this is the greatest idea ever.
Me too.
Yeah, I had that too.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate your
It was
efforts.
great.
I
You
know
guys did a
it's
wonderful.
Not
Yeah.
easy to lock it down like that.
Anybody have any major complaints that you heard? You did, I'm sorry.
No, that's
But I
a few
mean,
people that try to
I've
get
heard
in or
no
out
one
during
say
it,
anything bad,
outside of that,
Yeah,
it's an inconvenience, of course, but this public safety outweighs the inconvenience.
yeah,
that
I
night.
And
hear you.
you did a great job publicizing
Yeah.
it. There were so many, emails
Yeah.
and signs.
Charles worked very hard on that to make the maps and, coordinate where people could park, making sure setting up parking elsewhere was huge.
I think also what you suggested makes sense. If you do it a little later, you start a little later, then most people would be home by then. So even that would be much easier.
The only thing to note about that, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just to take into account, is the bands start around 5. What time?
5.
5.
Yeah.
So that, one of the thing was if the road wasn't closed between 5 and 6, it would have been kind of hairy outside of Village Hall when the 5 o'clock band was playing, especially with the public art, everything got pushed out.
Right.
So the PA system, instead of being on this side of the sidewalk, was actually on the sidewalk. So everybody who was watching in the street for the
Yeah.
first band, well, for all the bands, So that's the only thing that I would just
Okay.
try and figure out. Maybe
Yeah, if you
maybe means
communicate,
that location can't
Early
start until
bands.
6. or-
right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We can communicate with Doug
But
and
then we're
just,
gonna run into there's so many different issues, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely something.
I'm just saying it's something that has to be taken into account. And if the safety says that we have to leave it going until 6, that's fine. But I think that's something that the Halloween bands need to be notified about so we can schedule that accordingly.
great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
problem.
Yeah. It was a really
Sorry,
great.
I duplicated your question. I'm not gonna mention
No,
it.
I know, you were having side conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Presentation by the Welcome Irvington Committee. Come on up.
Happy and smiling. It's like, I guess welcoming, right?
It's
So-
better.
And just for our benefit and the folks at home,
Yes.
just introduce yourselves if you know.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ostrower. Nice to meet you. I'm you're sure. I think we've never met in person before. Nice to meet everyone. I'm here with Janine Love and Alex Reichgott. And we are so excited to be here to share this with you. I have copies in case anyone would like anything to write. You have digital, good, paper free.
I always say the same thing, I lose paper, I never lose a digital file.
Love it. Same. I'm very anti-paper. So we are so excited to take you guys through the proposal that we've put together and basically the work that we've done over the last few months. So if you could skip to the next page, this has definitely been a labor of love. And what we would love to take you through is basically an overview of who the community members are, what our objectives are as a group, what the strategy is that we put together, and our proposed rollout plans, and then little budget talk. So if you go to the next slide, basically this is an overview of our small but mighty group of 10. And hopefully there are some familiar names on the page, but basically when we were putting the group together, we were looking to have some variety in terms of when people came. So everyone here has the date they moved to Irvington, and so some moved as recently as last year, some I think, Alex, are you 2014? And basically what we all have in common is obviously we've all had very different experiences moving here. For example, when my family and I came, we were August of 2020, so right in the height of COVID, when everything was closed, no one was within 7 feet of each other. We literally, I was ready to put a sign at the farmer's market saying, "Be my friend." And so I think
that would work.
I think a few people have seen that's the farmer's market. Yes, so it wasn't a bad idea. But basically, we just all wanted to make the experience for everyone who comes after us easier. So basically, what we put together, if you go to the next slide, our objective. Oh, and the other thing I'll mention about the group is there is also variety in terms of family situations. Some people have no kids, some have one, some have 3, 4. So I think that also gives everyone a very different perspective on what their experience was like, how they were able to integrate into the community. And I think that's been a very useful perspective in terms of everyone's point of view. So on the next page, we have our objective. And I will actually read this to you, but basically we'd love to establish a village-supported committee that welcomes and integrates new residents into Irvington so they feel informed, connected, and engaged within their first 90 days. So obviously many ways to do that, but our overall is to have centralized resources, hosting events, and having a clear pathway into community life. So the way we will do that, if you go to the next slide, the strategy that we've put together is simply to develop an arsenal of tools. So obviously you probably see the PDF already, but it's basically to give tools and resources to people immediately when they come, so that they're not digging and clawing for the information like many of us were, so that they feel welcome, informed, and ease their transition as soon as they come. So on the next page, this is an overview of the strategy. I think what's been great is that we've had meetings every 5-6 weeks and trying to basically brainstorm what are all the things we want to do and what do we actually want to focus on. I think there's so much we could try, but we've both folded into these 4 buckets. Number 1 being a centralized welcome. So I think Janine has been a huge proponent of our welcome packet, welcome basket that we like to put together. And I think we have a huge opportunity to work with the real estate agents to tell us exactly who's moving, who are they, where are they, and to literally present them with something. So on day 1, it's coming, not day 1, but within the first month or so, it's something, it's literally someone and something is coming to your house to make you feel welcome and to give you also a digital hub so that, again, you're not searching for all of these resources, and that can have information on the schools, daycares, camps, anything you need to know about the village. Number 2, part of the strategy is the partnership. So coordinating with all of you and also with the establishments in town to see where we can offer resources and offer anything to these new people. I think it's really a win-win so that they can say first time you go to Hannah Sabin, you get a free manicure and a massage, but it's also going to obviously be driving them business. So I think it really goes both ways. Onboarding events we'd love to do on a seasonal basis, have neighborhood tours and mixers, but also again to take everything from just digital to in person, making sure that there are moments to be together. And then the volunteer pipeline is the last bucket, basically launching something like a neighborhood guides program to pair newcomers with somebody who's volunteered in their area. I live on Havemeyer Road, and I'd be happy to be the one to say, like, let's have coffee, let me show you around, and, so that you immediately know somebody in your area. And I think that also would give us a pipeline of volunteers. In the future who could then take our places someday and do all the heavy lifting. So if you go to the next slide, what we've put together here is what we would love to accomplish in 2025. Obviously, it is not lost on us that 2025 is basically over. But our main thought was to focus on this year, what we've done so far on the Welcome Basket Initiative and the Irvington Intel. And it's perfect that I have both Janine and Alex here because they've both been critical parts of both of these. So for the Welcome Basket, the two pieces of it are to literally provide a basket, and we have been working already with local businesses to see what they're willing to donate. Janine has literally gone door to door, pretty much every single establishment in town to ask what they'd be willing to offer. And, you know, I think she's made contact with so many. We've had some really positive feedback from the Eileen Fisher group, from
Everybody.
from literally everyone we've contacted so far. So I think we need to actually, you know, get their offers together, and then we'd love to figure out, you know, get the large, that's, you know, whatever the things are, put that together. The other piece is we'd love to develop a piece, I'm calling it lovingly swag, but something meaningful that people would actually want to have. It's not just like another pen. And so that's one piece of it. And then the other is the Irvington Intel. And that Alex has done an incredible job of basically putting together buckets of information that people actually need. So whether it be, you know, where as an adult you need resources like the Irvington Theater, or, you know, what to do with your kids when there's a day off from school and the various camps that are available, religious institutions, all of those things. And in addition, the calendar of events. So that is not something that we necessarily think needs to live in this group, but I think there's just so much amazing content happening in the town. So I think it's just sort of an amazing tool to be able to offer to someone when they first move, to be like, here, just so you know this is happening. So if you go to the next slide, what we wanted to show you guys is what we basically put together. So this is an overview of the outreach that we did for the Welcome Basket. So this is a piece of paper that Janine has literally been taking door to door for the establishments to basically say, here's what's in it for you, how it works, use this QR code, and you can just easily sign up through a Google form to say what they're willing to donate. What we've estimated, just based on talking to one of the real estate groups, is that there are around 40 to 50 new residents or built houses sold per year. So when we've been talking to the companies, we've basically been saying it would be on average 40 to 50 items that we'd be looking for them to donate. And we said, obviously, if you have 20, we'll take 20. So I think it's basically a difference between what are the offers that we could say. Again, Hannah's Haven has said they'll give away a free manicure and a free massage to a new person, but then we'd also love physical items that we could put into this basket, whether it be, you know, a couple scones or a bottle of wine. But basically, we're just trying to see what we can get, and then, of course, we'll put that together. And then on the next slide, I've put together an overview of basically what would be in the basket. So we would love to do some sort of a welcome letter, welcoming them. In addition, we'd love to do something like a refrigerator magnet. So this was designed by Laura Gray, who's on the group, who's an actual graphic designer, better than everything else I've done. But basically, just again, someone moves to the town, they have hopefully a brand new refrigerator, and it's blank. And so to put on information they might actually need, not just, you know, a logo, but like actual phone numbers that you might actually need, and then have a QR code, and that could link to the Irvington Intel, so that, you know, it's right there, literally on the refrigerator, and then that links to everything else. And then in addition, the basket would have an assortment of donations from the businesses, and then ideally a branded Irvington item. So on the next page, that's where we have some of the examples that we've put together as ideas. So obviously nothing has necessarily been sourced, but I think the idea is to have something that's useful. Again, not to just do like a pen, but something that, again, you're moving to a new town, whether it be an umbrella, a picnic basket, or something said a pizza cutter, like something you actually would want to have and have it branded Irvington, something they're always going to think of. The other option could be to partner with the PTSA. So on the bottom, those are all hats and scarves that the PTSA already produces. So we could go in on their run and, you know, I don't know if it would just be one hat per basket, but I think that's also an option if we didn't want to source our own. So on the next page, this is an overview of the Irvington Intel. And again, this has really been Alex's baby, and I'm so grateful. But basically, these were the buckets of information that we put together in terms of what people are looking for. And I think one of the other pieces that has been really helpful is that when I first moved here with another friend that I met, not at the farmer's market, but on a Facebook group, we created a WhatsApp group that we just lovingly call the Newbies of Irvington. That has now, it was two of us originally, and it's now I think over 270 people. And whenever people move here, they always, not always, but a lot of people join. We get a couple a week. And that's where people go, and they'll often say like, hey, my kid's turning 4, where should I get my cupcakes? Hey, Thanksgiving's tomorrow and my oven broke. That was me. But it's like quick info. And people are always asking, like literally somebody just this week said, schools are closed on Tuesday, where should we go? So I feel like having these kinds of buckets of information, when the sky's the limit, obviously it could just keep going, is just such a good starting point. And I think the good thing about it, if you go to the next slide, is this is not actually what it would look like. I just cut and paste from this long Excel, but it could be easily editable. It's on Excel right now, but I think we could make it editable for anyone on the committee and make it locked for everyone else. But what Alex did is these are actually all links. So not only is it a ton of information, and we were totally unbiased when we did it. Like we literally listed like all the Instagram pages, all the Facebook groups, for better or for worse. Just if people want the information, it's there. And if you go to the next slide, there's a little bit more. So I think it could keep going and going. Like somebody said at our last meeting, like, should we also add, the how to get into Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts? Like there's just so much, but I think just having a starting place would be amazing. And I think the next piece is just like, where does it live? So that's, that's the next little question mark. And if you go to the next page, that is where we've listed out just a very tentative calendar of events. And again, that certainly doesn't need to live in our world, but we were just thinking how useful it would be for someone to be able to say, here are the things happening by month. And obviously, looping in the Irvington Theater calendar and everything else, but I feel like just having it in one consolidated place would be so amazing. The next page, towards the end, is basically our proposed rollout. So I think skip down 2. But this is basically a summary of what we were thinking. So for the fall, this is what we've been working on so far. So basically we've been approaching the businesses to gauge interest. We'd love to compile the list, which we're working on now for the welcome basket. I think we're kind of in a good place unless anyone has other feedback on the magnet. I think that's something we could hit go on pretty easily. And then creating the intel, which I think could also be ready to go very easily. And then working with the real estate agents to figure out who the people are that we should be targeting. And then also we could develop this swag item if we figure out what we want that to be. Then in the spring, that's when we would figure out when the best time is to distribute the baskets. I think obviously from a real estate perspective, it seems like the hot times are spring and summer, but like if people are moving before school starts in the fall, like when is the time that we would want to do events? But I think maybe we do look at doing something in the spring and then something in the fall. And I think our thought with that also is like, not only to have a place for connection, but maybe, it's something that could be hosted at like a restaurant would be willing to do it, or, we had talked briefly about the senior center or just somewhere in town, but like, what an amazing opportunity if all of you guys could come and different facilities interacting with the new people. So I think it just all feels like a lot less like question marks. And then also in the spring, we'd love to publish the calendar of events, figure out a way to share the Irvington Intel, a page on the village website if that timing could happen, and then, as I said, host a welcome back. And the very last page is what we put together as a rough budget estimate. So this is very much up for discussion, and I think what we've broken it down to just as a starting point, and also I just want to throw out there is like we definitely are planning to get as much as we can from the establishments as we, all the donations that we can. But, from a welcome basket perspective, the magnet will cost money, the swag item will cost money, and then whatever item we put it in.
Basket.
Yeah, or letter. So we put $1,000. I don't necessarily know that it needs to be that much, but this was just, an estimate we were thinking. And then from an event perspective, if we were thinking 2 per year, again, this could be a bit high, but we were just trying to figure out, we wouldn't want to have to ask and then ask again. And I think, we had a conversation with David just before about, maybe there are opportunities that the funding could be something that the real estate agents, you had good, strong ideas about that maybe they would be, I think the main thing about whoever funds it is like, it's just such a win-win. in, that like, I think we just need to get it off the ground and then hopefully it can take on a life of its own. I think the other thing that Mayor Steele and I talked about was like, if there's a company like, Sunnyside or another, that if we were willing to put their logo on it, if they would be willing to fund it, a sponsorship program's fine for us too.
Can I ask a question about identifying people? So I think, how do you identify people who are not buying? So people who are new, who are renters?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there is someone on the committee who is, works for one of the real estate agents. And so that's where we've just loosely been getting the numbers, but I assume those are mostly for sales.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, I think, if we did something like this, I think it would be really harsh to do
Yeah,
just
for-
people who bought homes and like to have a new, commerce committee just for people who bought homes. So, and so that's one question, if you guys have thought about that and like, how do you access those people?
One suggestion I can make is
Yeah.
just to put some data on this is I'm on the board of my co-op.
Mm.
I'm on the committee that interviews people. And we approve anywhere from 5 to 10 renters a year.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's 5 co-ops in Irvington. You could speak to the boards, because I know, I can't imagine anyone on my board would be against, letting, an interview saying, and by the way, when you're approved here, or we can put the information to you, or we can give your information to them. or
Yeah. That's a great idea.
So that's one thought, that one question. And then there's like a lot of like, I think, single family homes too that get rented. So
Yeah.
sort of accessing those people.
Yeah.
And then also people who don't use, when you say realtors, you mean like Irvington realtors? Because my realtor was not from Irvington. It was from
Yeah.
Barnsley.
That's a
So
good
that's
point.
a hard one too. Yeah.
Do,
Yeah.
They're
do
gonna be from
realtors all
Tarrytown,
share the
Barnsley.
information, however, though? Like, aren't the realtors given at least the information that this house was sold, though it may have been with an outside?
The
Yeah.
MLS lists everything that's for
Yeah.
sale. and
Yes.
realtor can
Yeah.
access it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
That's for sale.
I see what you're saying. Like, if we involved the local realtors, then that may be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, I mean, how do you, so accessing, so sometimes with something like this, like there has to be maybe also an access point where people can sort of like reach out, right? Like I think, I think the WhatsApp groups are great. We have one on Riverview Road and, it's kind of the same, what you were describing is super helpful. We have a lot of new people actually who moved to Riverview Road. And those groups are helpful. I wish when I moved here, I had that group, that we have now. But, just from like a fairness perspective, like I think you have to really we would have to give a little bit more thought to how you really, because if you're just gonna get people that like some of the realtors know, that's gonna, I think, be.
Yeah.
I mean, just spitballing, maybe, we talked about obviously getting the information into people into their homes as well, but going around to some of the businesses, some of them are, willing to sort of do some advertisement in the business itself. So we might be able to do some sort of like magnet or advertisement. And, like, for example, Black Cat Cafe, they have like 1 million of those cards that they have out, or like the hardware store, they're always willing to put stuff or like cleaners, or we might be able to do something. Whereas if somebody actually utilized that service that's new, that's renting, and they see, like, please join us if you're new, or,
Yeah, like a
just
QR
as,
code.
I know that doesn't really solve the problem, but it might be
Yeah.
at least a way to sort of like get some fingers out.
Bulletin board in front of Village Hall.
Yeah, exactly. That, just sort of like public spaces.
So there
The
needs to be some
library.
outreach on your part to do that, I think.
Yeah.
I had a question about the baskets, just as something to think about. I think this is all a great idea, by the way, so I want to make that clear that I think this is awesome. I'm
Mhm.
really impressed. But one thing that occurred to me, and I don't know, have you spoken to the PTSA yet? Because here's the thing, a lot of the school groups sell this stuff as fundraiser to make money. So you don't want to undermine them. That would be bad, like as a welcoming thing.
Oh,
To
if
say,
you
oh,
did-
by the way, this money that
yeah.
you're kind of making, we're poaching that and we're going to now give this to.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that I think it's a welcome basket is a perfectly great idea, but I would steer away from the stuff that the school groups. It's like the IEF sells stuff.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
PTSA
I don't think
purchases
we weren't asking
Yeah,
them to
we
just
were-
give it to us.
Yeah,
No,
we
but I'm
were
saying,
gonna
even if you
give
give it
one-
away,
No.
that's something that, like, if you give
They
me
might have purchased
I
the blanket.
see.
a
I see what you're
baseball
saying.
cap, I'm not gonna buy that
Right,
from,
right. Yeah, no, you're right.
right? You don't wanna undermine
We
Yeah,
were
school
also talking
groups.
about possibly purchasing it from the PTSA, so that would kind of be like a sale is a
That's completely
sale.
different. And
Yeah.
then you're giving them business and that's
Right,
awesome.
yeah, no, it would be our way of like supporting
Okay.
the PTSA also.
I just wanted you guys to be thinking about that. You don't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
you can support them, it's fantastic. I wouldn't undermine them. I think that's
Yeah.
not a good way to go. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
and
just think
Blaine
about that.
Crawford is on the committee too, and he's very involved in the PTSA. So he was who got all the pricing on that, but yeah, no, I think
Yeah,
it's a
so
really
just
good
that's
point.
something to keep in mind because I was
Yeah.
like,
I think there are members on the board of the PTSA who are also on the.
excellent. Yeah, so that would be good. That would be great.
Yeah.
Just something that I was
No,
concerned
I was wondering, because I'm looking kind of at your membership and I'm wondering for your Mighty 10, do you have someone who's in like a more senior age bracket?
That is a good question. No, we
No.
don't. No, we have, no, we have a broad spectrum in terms of like married, not married, single without kids.
Yeah.
I did ask Doug McClure though, because Francis the O'Shea suggested I talk to him the other day, and he said he was too busy, but.
Well, at least you can maybe talk to the senior center to see if you can loop in with them. I mean, my in-laws were in their 80s when they moved here 4 years ago. So obviously a lot of these
Actually.
things wouldn't apply to them, but maybe, you know, so.
No,
Well,
actually,
that,
I
that
knew some
covers,
seniors
you
who
know
were
what,
moving.
they're actually, this is actually true. That's a good point. I was not even getting where you were going with that, but like the senior question, but there actually are seniors that move, right? Because your parents moved
Oh,
here
yeah.
Yeah,
older.
I know a
so
number of people
That's another kind of,
Well, this was actually a huge reason why I wanted to be a part of it, to be honest with you, is because I do get very concerned about people who don't use technology in that way, because we all have grandparents that maybe don't and see what happens to them. So we actually did talk about like senior center and things like that, but I know that we don't know personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Older,
yeah, I think just trying to maybe see if there's
Okay.
someone that wanted to, because that's a completely different, I think,
Yeah.
perspective.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, I really appreciate that you've included, you know, I think one of the inroads I think people, you know, is through school, right? That's how when we moved in 2019 and I also was like, does anyone want to be my friend? You know, but I appreciate your thinking about like families that don't have children, so wouldn't be connected necessarily through the school system. But I think like the senior aspect, because senior center too, I think is a really great resource and also not.
Mhm.
My parents moved here in, a couple of years ago. And I think that outreach would be really appreciated.
Yeah.
They actually are signed up, well, my mom is signed up for the Civic Engage.
Oh, really?
Oh,
technology.
good. She
Yeah,
gets-
she gets the
That's a good
text.
contact, I hear.
I think she's probably on this meeting. She likes to watch. me. Yeah, okay.
Tell my
Yeah. The other point that I had for you too was, and I'm getting prompted by seeing Charlotte here, is just coordinating with the green team. As you might know, they're very active. They've also gone through a big, like, when you were talking about neighborhood guides, they went through a big process of organizing and like mutual aid. And so, and then the other really great resource, there's many, but one of the resources that I'm really fond of is when people get here and they think about renovating. They have a whole like green renovation guide. So like how you can renovate in the greenest way or like donate your cabinetry instead of putting it in the landfill. So just coordinating with, I mean, I think you've compiled such great information. Thank you. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I didn't know about that. And I think, you know, so you're not recreating or having to recreate, just, you know,
Yeah.
connecting with
Yeah.
people who've already done that great work. Yeah, great. Oh, I think like also just like in line with outreach, there's a lot of people who move it here that like move to maybe Terrytown but do Irvington schools,
Mhm.
so you might have to add a little bit to.
Well, I had a question actually about that and whether or not that's of concern at all.
Yeah.
But we've had this conversation many times. Where do we draw the line? Because the river towns, as you know, we really utilize all the resources across the board. I mean,
Can
we
you
all
make a
have-
guide for all of Westchester?
I know.
It's basically what I'm asking. No.
2020.
Yeah.
All or nothing. All or nothing.
But whether or not that should be, you know, like, for example, we have a couple of members that are part of this group who kids use a dance school that is in Terrytown. So we could potentially include them, but how do we feel about that?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not competing with any kind of dance school because Irvington doesn't have one, but I just don't know yet.
Yeah, yeah. It
It's
gets
a
a
conversation.
little, yeah,
Ongoing
yeah.
conversation.
And then I think the welcome basket's a great idea. I think like anytime we're thinking about donated goods, it's just like, are businesses willing to do that? Like, are they gonna say like, I can only do it 1 year? Can I do it, you know? So thinking about, you know, donations and then also like funding, just, you know, how do we look beyond, you know, 2026 and like keep that going so that people who follow have similarly welcome experience. Because we're also always thinking about funding and how, if it's an ongoing program, you know, where that money is gonna come from.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this, I think one of the things that we have to talk about too is just committee funding. So most of our committees do not get any funding. So I think I think we need to talk about that, right? Whether one for, I think the idea of baskets, I think from my view would have to be donated by, and especially if you're going through real estate agents and they're the ones telling you there's a new person, they probably just sold them their house. They should be able to give you the basket and then you could put in the like welcome stuff into that, you know? So I think that's probably a more sustainable model than even just having the businesses donate, because we have such few businesses here. So just thinking about longevity and sustainability of that kind of programming. And then I just had two thoughts about like events. It's sort of difficult because again, most of our committees do not get funding. So most of the committees have to raise their own money. So I don't know how you guys feel about funding one versus another for an event, right? Like I think one of the things that's difficult, like the Arts and Culture Committee, for example, the entire Bulldog program is all done by fundraising. Like the village, we don't spend like $1 on program. So just thinking about that, like what is that, you know, for you guys, like, you know, the PTSA, for example, does have welcome events, newcomers events. How do you envision like maybe like, you know, again, there you have a different issue because you also are talking about people who don't have children, right? Or maybe with people who have children, but giving some thought to like what kinds of events you can have. I know that when we had the first, like we had a DEI picnic, our first picnic, and I think we had it in Matheson Park, and the village also didn't contribute a penny to that. I think we did sort of like everybody kind of brought stuff, whatever. So I just think in terms of funding, you have to kind of get, I've been on every committee, I've been super creative, so I think I've been on zero committees where they gave us money. Were you on any committee where they?
The Green Policy Task Force has had a budget but never used it.
Right. Has a budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I have a budget, which is separate.
You have a separate budget, yeah. So we have to think about that, right? How do we budget for committees and if committees come? But I do think with the basket, like, I think you have to be more I also feel like it's hard for the village to buy people's stuff, right? Like only some people's stuff. That's kind of I don't even know how that would work legally, right? I think it's a probably.
It does get a little challenging.
It gets a challenging. So, but it could be if you sort of partner with the real estate agents, right? Where you could offer that. To me, you still have this issue that I talked about, like what do you do with renters if you want, you know, if you really want to be welcoming, you kind of have to be more than welcoming to people who own homes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's hard. It's not, I'm telling you that I know it's not easy.
Yeah,
Right? That's
yeah,
a hard, it's hard to know how to do that. Yeah.
And to your sort of centralized information point, I know Charles, you're already working on, at least from the village's perspective, a landing page that will have, you know, useful numbers, a little bit like the one you presented in here, but focused on village departments and things of that sort. And we can figure out how that might interact with what you're doing and support what you're doing.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the information, like sort of what you're going for makes a lot of sense. I think all those things are really hard to access, right? Like, other than talking to people, especially things like what to do with your kids on a day off, like those kinds of things that are not going to be on a page, I think is super useful information.
I thought the mentor idea was great too. 'Cause I
Like a buddy.
Yeah, because like,
buddy
because
system.
doing the interviews in my complex, oftentimes people then will reach back out to me and say, hey, like, do you know a good locksmith or something like that? And
Yeah.
to formalize something like that, especially if you're not moving into a situation where you have an interview, so you know who you're talking to first and everything.
I think especially within each neighborhood too, there's such unique little things that happen, so.
Yeah, I mean, those WhatsApp groups are super helpful. Like our WhatsApp group on Riverview Road is really helpful. Definitely wasn't there the first, I mean, in 2011, it wasn't there. It was all trial and error. Now it's like
The
somebody's
one
like,
upside
do
is
you
social
have
media,
like,
right?
you know, it's like in 2 seconds. Oh, do you have, you know, do you like know how to do X thing, or do you know somebody? And it's like
Yeah.
10 recommendations, which is super
Well,
nice.
and somebody in ours, I don't even know what he did, but used AI to basically, it has summarized. So it has every recommendation for every locksmith, whatever anyone has said, I'll say
Wow.
who recommended and. it's
Wow, that's
Like it just,
impressive.
you can bang it out.
I'm just gonna public comment over here. Thank you, first of all. It's so great what you guys are doing. I feel like I've been in numerous conversations since I moved here about doing this exact thing. And the Green Policy Task Force, now Irvington Green Team, also talked about doing this. We even met with Francis and talked about creating packets for the real estate agencies. And then I learned that you guys were forming, and it was like, well, maybe, and then Charles is doing all this great stuff, revamping the website and creating more clarity on our resources. And now I feel like this trifecta. Right?
It's gonna be great, yeah.
People are gonna feel
welcome.
And we'll welcome those people. But yes, we're offering like, you know, what to deal with your waste and how do you landscape sustainably and, you know, all kinds of free consultations and all kinds of cool stuff,
It's
right?
amazing.
So yeah, between having like a good landing page that leads to, you know, your actual recommendations of businesses, which neither of us can do, and our green resources, it's a wonderful combination. And also the calendar, I feel like so many people have wanted to do the calendar, but you have to have somebody who's dedicated to keeping it up, right? It is actually a lot of work, the calendar. Always all the events, but everybody wants it. It doesn't, you know, there's like all these partial calendars.
Yeah.
So to have one comprehensive one would be a huge service. And then I'll have to come back to that, but let's brainstorm together. later.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Great. Yeah, thanks.
And if we had this conversation, but if there are certain businesses that you haven't been able to get into or you need introductions,
Thank you.
if I don't know, somebody else up here will.
I've gone into every business.
Yes.
I've done that
yeah,
like
yeah.
1,000 times. You gotta go 3 times on average. The first 2 times they just blank stare you.
The
Like,
the
what
dry
are you
cleaners
talking
were a
about?
little.
They were feeling it.
Here. Three times is like the
Yeah, okay. All right,
average.
well, that's good
The
to know.
first couple of times, just nothing.
No, so Eileen Fisher, oh my God, we're emailing because we have an email address now, and so we're
Yeah.
emailing every day, but they're so excited, which is, I'm very excited too, specifically with them because of their, you know, textile recycling program and their Waste No More program. Having it in our backyard here is just such a special thing. So that's really exciting. And places like Felina, the jewelry, you know, they're really eager. They really want this, you know, the Three Lions Barber down, you know, they know, you know, it's a win-win. It's advertisement for them as well, so.
Doing such a service, I mean, for all the businesses, but also for us, like we have a hard time preaching people. And I think that having somebody who's actively doing it, I don't know how we would possibly like pay you enough to do that. I mean, I bet you could think of some way.
They're like, I can.
Actually, oh wait, that's slides fault.
Another
Okay.
person who's also been wonderful is, and I don't know if you know his name, I'm forgetting, from Ludi's.
Yes.
And he's
Tim.
so amazing. And he was
Yeah.
like, you know, when we moved to Ardsley, like it was the exact same thing. So he was like, obviously his involvement with the Chamber of Commerce, he was like, you know, there's so much more. He was like, I agree, let's start with Irvington, but like, there's just so much we could do once we figure this out. And your point about the renting is totally right. I would be rented
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a year and yeah. I
The
would
only
never
thing
be
I was
touched.
wondering, I work in healthcare, so I'm always dealing with HIPAA laws. But is there any kind of like legal issue with getting names of people who've moved to the?
Who?
We don't.
From whom?
yeah,
Sorry.
whom. We don't
That's
have.
what you're
them.
asking.
Well, rather just having them, like, is it an issue that they're in?
I think the
public?
schools probably have some information for new families, but I'm not sure they would be able to share.
Share
it.
it.
But there's a
I know
public,
they
there's a
do.
public, you know, the school publishes that public directory of families. You can opt out of it, but if you don't opt out of it, you're in it.
There's really specific laws about, I've just been going
Yeah.
through this,
Join
about
the
what things can be
PTSA
published
and
directories or their own special thing.
Oh, that's right. I had to
It's
do that
something.
training. We probably saw the same video.
Oh, yes, I was, actually.
Yeah.
Well, that was my only concern was like, I don't want to reach out to people who don't want to be reached.
Right, but we don't have,
We will
like.
welcome you.
That's why I-
Regardless.
that's why I don't think there's any laws that like realtors, divulging or, it's.
It's a little different though, because I think you normally, and this is probably a conversation with the realtors, like they would probably tell their client, this is like the hard thing between the renter, right? Like if you rent, but they probably would say like, oh, they should, right? Like this will be part of your onboarding of them.
Yeah.
Is like, they're gonna say to their clients, like, oh, we have this great new like committee, they're gonna reach out to you. So they'll expect it.
And a lot of times for single family homes, real estate agents handle the renting process. Also, I mean, I know a lot of people who have moved and rented homes and real estate agents also do. And I was just thinking, does the post office allow you, I don't know if it's a rule, allow you to hang like a QR code, like new here?
I was kind of thinking about that,
It's
like,
like
or the
there's a
public
little-
library.
Well, they
Like,
have a
they're
little
right,
bulletin board.
something.
The library,
Most of
but all of the businesses will probably let you.
I was just thinking about
The library.
real estate is public record, right? So like,
Right.
I feel like all my different hats are like merging between my education and my journalism. So yeah, so that's all public record. So anytime somebody buys, right, that deed, all that is public record. So there's no.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
privacy
just getting
violations.
I'm getting a picture of them like.
That's fine.
They're like, we're just trying to give us some damn baskets.
They're like,
There was a direct question, there were privacy concerns, and the more I think about it, the more I.
I am concerned about the privacy
I
concerns.
Like,
actually
I'm
am.
concerned
I
about
think,
it.
but,
Like, how do
okay,
you know
so,
I just moved?
so real estate
Yes,
transactions.
absolutely.
Real estate
Absolutely.
transactions are public record. John?
Yeah. Because I am involved with the PTSA and there are parents who don't want to be contacted or whatever. So it's sort of, it is a very like, touchy,
Sure.
in
Go
the
ahead,
days
bring on
of
the
like
parade.
everything's online, I get
You have
Perhaps you
two
could
outlets, right, for
deliver
that, like one,
something
the realtors
to
are gonna work with you to tell their clients, so that'll be okay,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
two, people will
And they can
contact you
say
through like
to somebody
QR
new.
codes.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Because you're not, I mean, it's hard, right?
Neighborhood networks is real too. That was the other point I was gonna make, is that I have mapped out where there are WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups per hyper-local neighborhood node. Then there's generally a facilitator and they can let every time they add someone to their group, they can also let them know about it.
Or even drop the QR code like the way we do in our neighborhood, like when there's a new, like for new, we have a lot of new people. But we like drop new stuff, like people that, like I was like, Veterans Day ceremony. I noticed no one came from. It wasn't very successful.
John made a
but
really
yeah.
good point, actually, that leases are not public record, the way the deeds are. So for the rentals, you would have to work, I know it doesn't cover everything, but at least with the co-ops, you can work through the co-op boards and we can get that out there. For the single family houses, that's gonna be a challenge that,
But maybe
But the
some
real-
of
the
the
realtors,
some of
yeah.
the realtors, some
Yeah.
you're gonna miss like the
Yeah.
private rentals, but maybe you hit those people by the.
Yeah,
the-
I think we're just gonna have to do like the QR code and the places they would go, post office, library, cleaners,
Yeah.
coffee.
I mean, I think the only thing that could be awkward is like, if we have a thing saying new here and there's an assumption that you're gonna get something, like anyone driving through town could just do it and then we're like, where did you move? What's your address?
I see
Like,
what you mean. Yeah,
someone
yeah,
just-
yeah.
We
Well,
can have a QR code that, they have to write like their address,
yeah.
we can always
A
give them
specific
call.
landing
We
page
will
for
be showing
that.
up at your
Yeah, you're
doorstep.
right.
We'll be there.
very sinister.
Yeah.
kids like
Well, that was a
pizza,
worry with the
like people
Eileen
getting
Fisher,
random
because I
baskets.
was like, I was worried that this coupon was gonna get out that
Yeah.
everyone is gonna wanna use for Eileen Fisher, and I was like, no, we have to figure this out.
Yeah.
Like,
Will have to be equality.
Well, and then I think also you're gonna have to define like newcomer too, like what's the look back,
Right.
you know?
We're starting.
You go to any committee meeting, people introduce themselves by how long they've been here, and I'm like, 2019, I'm still new, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
you probably will just need to define that or.
So more to come. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yeah, thank you so much
You're like,
because.
"Ooh, lots of feedback.
That's a good
Right.
thing.
Yeah. No, but thank you, because,
This is
you know,
positive.
it's huge output of work,
Good.
and if we're a small community, but it can be very difficult to find your people.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really great step towards. Thank you.
Thank
Needed it for a long time. Thank you.
So next up is our presentation of the 2025 Climate Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Plan.
Adaptation.
Sorry. Assessment and, it says adaptation. Okay, adaptation. I'm only reading what's on the agenda.
Oh, I'm like, my plan is.
Let me,
Okay.
I have a question for you first.
Yeah.
You're gonna present this. Is there an ask? Are you asking us to adopt it?
I'm asking you to adopt it.
Then I'm gonna have some comments that we're gonna have to talk about.
Okay.
I'll just give you an overview. You have a lot of things that say they're gonna happen in 2025.
Mhm.
How do you want to, you can decide how you want to deal with that. And then there's a line or two in here that I don't think I could let stand, and I'll give you an example.
Okay.
It says the Irvington Reservoir is in danger of breaching. I cannot have a document that this board adopts that says anything even close to that. I have
Right.
not read, I have read through this, but I have not looked, that's on page 40, it would be your page 24.
Mhm.
You explain what you mean down below. It says, let's see, regular maintenance, it includes lowering water levels to allow for increased precipitation and so on. If you had worked that concept, in other words, without the regular maintenance of lowering the water level, the Irvington Reservoir, I have to figure out how I actually wanted to say it, but in litigation parlance, that would be an admission against interest when we
Yeah.
adopt it, and it would not do
Great.
us well.
We can make that change.
And these small things, I'm not, overall, this is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but we should figure that out before it pops on an agenda, and I guess
Oh.
that. Yeah, I mean, in other words, well, we couldn't adopt it tonight anyway, but we can, I don't think it's a lot of work. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
going through and seeing where you put 2025, and I'll try to flag, and if anybody else has sentences like that we could modify a little differently, just to be call it a little less sensational, it would be in the village's interest, that's all.
Great, I've been seeking feedback for like a year, so I'm thrilled.
That is a fair statement. I should have added, it's our fault that there are out of date dates in this.
Yeah.
Because we saw it and then just didn't get back to it.
Yeah.
So,
So no problem. I would love it if we could adopt it for 2026. That was a commitment I made way back when. Otherwise, the time is not terribly sensitive.
okay.
Yeah, so I have I can give you a sort of 12-minute spiel that for the public and to sort of
Perfect.
summarize. I know you guys have all heard this a bunch, but yeah, so I presented about a year ago the slide deck version of this, which was sort of high level, and you guys were all okay with that. So the version that we're looking at tonight, this giant Word document, 56 pages, is a template that we get from New York State for the Climate Smart Communities program, which we will, if we pass this, if we adopt this, we get points with the Climate Smart Communities, and that we do need to, we're still silver status now. Every few years you have to refresh, your points expire, and if we roll out gold, we would go for it. Now that Nikki Armacost is retiring as mayor for Hastings, we have a shot at being #1 in the state. So we could make that our next target.
We'll see her on November 20th. As Elaine, so hopefully she's not watching.
She's a good friend too. Yeah, I've already told her. I'm taking your place now that you're on Hastings. Yeah. Anyway, so this is a very long document that has a certain amount of template language from program. But just to give you a quick overview, it's the climate vulnerability assessment, which is a state protocol that has a whole rigorous program to find gaps. First of all, to figure out what our vulnerabilities are from an assets point of view, and also vulnerable populations, and then also gaps in our planning. So all kinds of things came to light from that really thorough process, and it's very well documented in here. It's a lot of protocol we had to follow to make sure that the community was involved. We had surveys, lots of public meetings, lots of feedback. We met with all department heads. It was extensive. And so from that, we got our ideas for the adaptation plan. So what are our vulnerabilities that we need to address? Scroll through here to so I'll share with you the 3 threats that are regionally determined to be the top 3 are sea level rising, heat waves, and flooding and power outage from increased storms and precipitation. So then all of our action plans fall into those 3 categories. Here, it's so huge. And then I have a number of points from the summary assessment I also sent, which I'll go through with you. Yeah, so there's recommended strategies, and that is broken up into planning, infrastructure, and natural assets, and community outreach and education and engagement. And then there's the final section is on process implementation and monitoring, how often we're going to go back and review and such. Okay, so now going over to the next, if you want to skip to the next document, which is just this 2-page action priorities in progress and action priorities that are still outstanding. Just sort of summarizes everything else. The takeaways for you guys. I think nothing here is terribly new for you. There shouldn't be any surprises. And a lot of this, I will give Larry huge credit here. The minute I articulated needs, he started working on them, whether we adopted it or not. You know, he was already like, have already won grants. We have already, won the grant for the solar array and battery for the senior center. Like that was something that came from this work, the idea to do that. And the transfer switch, which you guys have already passed into the budget for next year, I think. So a lot of this is already in the works. Culvert upgrades, you guys know all about that, totally in the works. And that predates me in this plan. Resilient heating and cooling center, was what I was saying, from the senior center, green infrastructure and stewardship, continuing deer management, implementing grant-funded native plantings in the woods, restoring natural wetlands. There's all kinds of amazing work happening in the woods. And water quality, addressing algae blooms and fish die-offs at Halsey Pond and Manor Pond, having riparian plantings, aeration options, educating residents on their landscaping and grant applications. A lot of this is already in the works. We've been looking at numerous grant opportunities for Halsey Pond, for Matheson Park, and we're getting better understanding what we need to jump the next time a grant comes along. We need to do some studies. Landscaping practices, some of this is a little overlap. There's a lot still to be done there. That's never ending, frankly. But yes, trying to make sure that people are adding less fertilizer, because that ends up as excessive nutrients in the watershed that results in these eutrophication, which is algae blooms ultimately, and hurts the whole ecosystem. And we have people like Leola, God bless Leola, offering free sustainable landscaping consultations. She's met with 12 households and given them personalized feedback on how to take care of what the opportunities are, what they're doing, what they could be doing differently on their own properties. It's just amazing. Riparian buffers, I mentioned that we actually applied for a grant at Matheson Park and did not get it, but we got feedback as to why. So, we're getting more prepared to actually win some money for these things. Reservoir dam safety, we have to change some language around that. But I'm curious on the status of that, because I feel like that seems to have been paused forever, or else I'm just not in the loop.
I don't think so. I think the engineers are, I drove by it recently and there are pipes sitting in the ground which are measuring.
So it's like an ongoing thing.
Oh yeah, I mean the
Okay.
dam maintenance is an ongoing thing. We met with Tectonic engineers last month to talk about our dams.
Okay.
And it's
Great.
and it's not just the reservoir, but it's Halsey as well.
Scaling green infrastructure, including bioswales, rain gardens, permeable surfaces, downspout disconnection, all kinds of stuff to mitigate stormwater runoff. Some of this is already in the works. A lot more can be done. Building neighborhood networks, as we discussed, for hyperlocal support. We're talking about possibly doing something like connecting to the block parties that are happening, and maybe adding some block parties as a way to bring resources to the communities, make sure that the communities are connecting. And recruit and train volunteers. I mean, we're talking about similar things here. We're talking about partnerships for food and secure families. We used to have that great program during the pandemic that has gone away, and looking at resurrecting that outside of village administration with a nonprofit. There's opportunity there. Emergency preparedness. Irvington Green has hosted several discussions with the Red Cross and Homeland Security about how to prepare. And we had our games, Irvington Zombies and Trigger Triage, which was gamifying education and preparations, and that was really fun. Brought a lot of new people into the conversation that way. All that's ongoing. Outstanding action priorities include plan updates. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is how out of date our comprehensive emergency management plan is. It still says things like, chance of an epidemic is 0.5% or something like that. So that and the hazard mitigation plan also needs to be updated. And we're waiting on the county, who did say, they promised me they were going to lead this in 2025. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I think it is imminent that they will help guide us on those updates, which will be very helpful. And then those updates should be referencing our comprehensive plan, and all the plans should be talking to each other, including this plan. And we should also include things like preparations for extended power outages, evacuation routes, early warning emergency alert systems, the vulnerable persons registry, which I set up. We had it written in some of our documents that we would have one. We didn't. I created one, but it's not really properly instituted yet. Like, we need to figure out the protocol around that still. And we want to integrate these into the comprehensive plan, as I said. Event documentation, I talked about this with Charles, and we do need to get to the bottom of we need more clarity on what it means. But Todd said, he was game, and it is the best practice to document every time there's an extreme weather event. How much is it flooded? Where is it flooded? If there was a power outage, kinds of things. GIS, maintenance records. I know that anything that was built, we have a record for. Also, Warwick is looking at installing a weather station capable of monitoring rainfall at every 5-minute interval, which is good for emergency alerts and for data collection. And he's just loving that and can manage that. Transit coordination, I would love to be put in touch with someone at Metro North. I know they have a very slow tour of their 20-year resilience plan, raising the tracks in some places, making walls around the tracks in other places. Like, we need to know and understand what their plans are for Irvington and coordinate with them. Plus, we'd love to work with the MTA on other things like planting trees on their property. There's all kinds of opportunities to partner with them if I can get a hold of him. Budget alignment. I would love to meet with, once you guys confirm that these are your priorities and we adopt a plan, I would love to meet with the department heads, with Charles, to think about, to review the basic tenets of it and understand where their budgets and plans might evolve to incorporate this and how they can adjust. Urban canopy, this is a big one that came up in the survey from residents, especially the elderly, that Main Street is really hot. And we haven't had any policy to maintain our canopy previously. In fact, our policy was to replace trees once they got to a certain height to keep them small and manageable, which, since the Tree Commission has adjusted that, so now we're actually trying to maintain a canopy so we can have shade, which will just increasingly be of value down the line. But we might consider an urban canopy policy. We could increase our budget for tree planting and ongoing care. Metro North, as I mentioned. A natural resource inventory. This is something I can do. I could take this on early 2026 if you guys approve. It's another sort of template, big document that qualifies us for grants and such, and it's useful for future land use, facilities, and comprehensive planning. And establishing and implementing a monitoring process. So disseminate the plan to relevant departments so that they may review the strategies, assign organizational responsibility to relevant department owners, and initiate a process for implementation. Status reports on overall vision and the recommended strategies in the plan are to be developed every 2 years. Irvington commits to reviewing the assessment at least once every 7 years. That's what it says in the plan. So if you guys agree with all of that, we're good. Tell me if you have questions. Besides, fine tooth comb adjustments.
I keep saying this, but it won't be on my watch, but there's a lot in here that impacts the budget and the capital budget. So that's going to require some thought on the part of the board, however it's configured. And I don't want to speak for the next mayor, but if I was doing it, I'd need to, and I will get you a quick response in terms of the things I talked about at a high level. But the timing for this thing probably should be when there is budgeting going on, which I guess starts probably not too long from now, maybe the next 60 to 90 days. But that's when you need to know, because what good does it do to have a board that says, okay, great, we adopt this thing, but doesn't put money behind it?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot because, you know, I mean, Arlene last time, a year ago, said to me, you know, what the budget for each of these items. And honestly, without meeting with all the department heads, and really getting into the weeds on it, it was just impossible to answer that. A lot of this is like, if we agree that it's a priority, then Larry would find a grant for it, you know, where and when
Yeah.
a grant came along.
I understand, and I wasn't, in what I just said, I wasn't saying to you, tell me how much it's gonna cost.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You can't do that. It's more, when you give us a concept and we say, okay, that sounds like a good idea, then we have to figure out how would we go about doing it.
Yeah.
I guess I agree with that. I think though, if I understand this, if this is more like a blueprint for what
Yeah.
we want to do. And then I
That's right.
think you kind of have to move to the next step, which is always the hard part, which is integrating like with what you want to do, with like the realities of the departments, the budget constraints in any given year.
That's right.
And then looking for grants for where you could, but then, you know, some of this we have to implement and
Mhm.
pay for. But I think unless we implement it and start talking about it, you know, you can't, it's like a loop, you can't get
Yeah.
started until.
I agree, and I have been struggling with this exact thing, and I didn't come up tonight. I do think we need to kind of parse them because it's, I think the budget conversations is where that really happens and comes to life, and this is the higher level aspirational document.
Got it. Well, you have, there's something that I think is particularly helpful in the sense that you try to allocate things to different departments.
Yeah.
So that when those things, their piece of the budget comes forward, we can look at, okay, what year did you think this is happening and how should that be implemented into a budget? That's what,
Yeah.
you know, people want to
You
do.
know, and this has come up a lot, right, where we have talked like with the Woods Committee, when, you know, Zoe, we've talked about budget implications of certain things, but I think unless we say these are things that are important that we want to do, then it's really hard for then like Maureen to think like, okay, I have to think about what I'm doing in Halsey or the
Mhm.
Woods. And so I do think it's important to sort of like implement this plan and then kind of empower, right, Charlotte, Charles, to kind of start having these conversations, because
Yes.
I think for most of our department heads, this is not their wheelhouse, right? This is going to be a process of educating and like them feeling comfortable asking questions and being like, how do I even implement this? Like, I think that's really fair to know that that's going to be the first step. But I think we have to provide like the resource to start that process.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, yes.
But knowing what it'll cost. I mean, I'm on,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
opposite of solar panels on anything. We talked about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very supportive, but I think it's important to know what all these things are gonna
Yeah.
cost, so.
And I think you're
Yeah.
right, but I think you can't even get there unless we say
No,
it's
I
even
agree.
something that's important to us, right? Then for
Agreed.
Maureen or any department head, they're not necessarily gonna work on that because
Yeah.
we are not saying. it's
No, the
important.
policy should be
Yeah.
adopted and some money should be given so that
Correct.
these things can happen, but before, again, not like John said, I won't be involved in that, but,
I'm gonna tie you to-
no, you're not. But what I'm saying is that by the time, at that moment, is, okay, this is what everything is cost, that's when the board can make a reasoned decision as to whether the resources are there to pay for the things that need to be done, but you can't say we're gonna do these things without knowing what they're gonna cost. But I agree with
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
that we can say we favor these things
Yeah,
if it can be funded, and
Exactly.
here's some money to go find out if it can be
that's
funded.
really what it's saying,
Yeah.
like, I mean, the only solar panels mentioned in here are the ones we already want a grant for.
Right.
You know, I'm not listing items in here that clearly have a budget associated with that. It's more like, you know, let's look for grants for this.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's fine, I mean.
Yeah.
Again, I think in 4 years, I've been really clear about, I'm in favor of anything solar, anything that's gonna help, with that, the architecture people didn't like me when I said that. I put solar panels on Village Hall.
Charlotte, could you identify what you use the term vulnerable persons registry? Could you
Yeah.
define what that is? Like who are the vulnerable people? Are they older people or people with mental issues?
It's actually articulated very clearly on the actual vulnerability sign up form.
Okay.
And I'll send it to you, but it's, yeah, people who may not be able to be, whether mentally, physically, or language wise, might not be privy to what's going on in an emergency, for example. Or might need help if the power goes down, they might, have, I mean, if they have life support that is power dependent or can't get down the stairs, there's a number of physical and mental disabilities that
Okay.
qualify them.
And that information would be, I guess, privy to emergency first responders.
Yeah, the police have access to it, but frankly, the protocol is not fleshed out.
And I thought like part of what you were doing with the zombie game.
Yeah.
The first one was like even trying to identify. So like part of it was like in the neighborhoods, right? Like we met, like a subgroup of our neighborhood met, and we were like, like who know, like do we know people who like refrigeration for medication, right? Like is one of them, right?
Yeah.
And we really were like, oh, okay, well, who's older? Like if if like the idea I thought was like also if first responders can't get there, that mutual aid, at least in your neighborhoods, we would be able to identify and know people like.
That's separate from the registry, but yes, that's
Yeah.
the neighborhood mutual support.
Right, the mutual.
Some of that may be, I have HIPAA concerns though.
Mm-hmm.
I would, if I
So
had
the registry
medical
people-
issues, I wouldn't necessarily want my entire street
Yeah.
knowing that.
Yeah, it's obviously it's up to the
Yeah,
individual
this was
to.
what we were doing
But
was
they're both
voluntary.
voluntary.
Yeah.
I just wanted to appreciate the thought about, major weather events. I had a conversation with Charles about this as well, and about, I think the piece that's missing, because I've spoken with Todd about this also, is, to debrief and be able to kind of talk about like who did what and like kind of create a timeline. And Charles and I talked about like a kind of standard like form or template that could be filled out. And then I think
Great.
the other piece that's important is that, the public has, right? Because one of the things that really stood out to me was a survey about like what people are anxious about.
Yeah.
And I think knowing like, here's like, there is a plan for things, like here's what happens and here's the
That was
change. And
something
it
else I
also
put
allows
together.
us to look back and say, is there anything that could be done better? Are we missing like, critical supplies? Like, are we missing staffing, et cetera? So I just
Exactly.
wanted to say I really appreciate that element of it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And increasing the like communication part of it so that more people in the community are aware.
Yeah.
Because I think, what I noticed is when we had the big storm this summer, is like we were getting like there were texts and dribs and drabs and like photos, and just having a place to like standardize that and like store that, and then this way we have a record
To do in an emergency. And I created this document, but it's not very well baked because our comprehensive emergency management plan is so out of date that a lot will be improved when that's done.
Yeah.
And I understand historically when I've asked Larry about it, the answer was, well, every event is different, but there's coming fast and furious now, right? And we can start to document what we learned from each one, and there will be overlap. And just being more versed in how we responded previously will prepare us better for the next.
Yeah, and I think it just gives an opportunity for, the different pieces and lenses, right? So from the green perspective, like what could prevent more of that flooding?
Yes.
And like the police, the DPW, like all the different parts, just looking at like what they did and how they did it. I think is really useful.
Thank you,
Thank you.
especially for coming out this hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is the 2025 Deer Management Vegetation Report. Thank you for being patient. And just to give you the 30-second setting of the stage, this report was part of the deer management plan. We employed a hunter. We wanted to make sure we had a measurement, not just some random number of deer that we think should be eliminated. How do we get to the stage where there's more of a balance in the vegetation and that the forest can sustain itself? You may want to say it differently, but at least for the folks at home, they have something to listen to.
Yeah, no, I think
That summarizes.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely accurate. Last year, we, Danielle Bagley-Miller, Dr. Bagley-Miller performed a vegetation survey that established the baseline before we began deer management. This year, we performed what is considered year one's vegetation survey with the help of volunteers. There were community volunteers as well as Nature Center summer interns who helped us. We went out and surveyed
2 hot, sticky and buggy days in August, the 8 plots. And as expected, there were no drastic changes, but there was positive trend was not only measured, but also visible. So for the native tree seedlings, we counted those as well as deer sensitive for the second year. For the tree seedlings, there was a decrease in seedlings per plot, which we attribute anecdotally to the fact that last summer and fall and this past summer were extremely dry.
It's my recollection, and correct me if you have different recollection, that Danielle Begley Miller had said originally, do not expect to see a dramatic change in the first year. It's 2 or 3 years when you start to see things.
That's right.
Charlotte, was that a?
5, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, well.
Thank you.
5 to see
Dramatic
real
change, but to
dramatic
see a change.
But
yeah.
yes, no, we need at least 2 to 3 years for the forest to have a break from the deer browse pressure. So this year there was a decrease in the seedlings measured, but the woods was dry. All of the streams were dry. All of the bogs and wetlands were dry. Trees that even in June were alive have died. So it's been a very hard time for anything to grow. There was an increase in variety of species, and the average height increased most significantly in seedlings that were greater than 6 inches, which is positive because those are the ones that have they have the better root system for absorbing nutrients and water. So the fact that those are thriving and had the most significant growth was a positive, despite the drought issue. The biggest measurement or most significant sort of change was that the proportion of browsed seedlings decreased from 68% down to 38%. So there is, there's less pressure measured. In the wildflowers, the average count increased just slightly. So did the number of species. And the average height increased by almost an inch. And the most significant measurement of the wildflowers was that the average number of reproductive plants, and that's significant because that means that the plants are reproducing and providing seeds, and that's positive for the woods. All of the measurements suggested there's less deer pressure and a positive trend. Outside the plots were other positive observations: seedlings above deer browse height that had no signs of browse. And 8 of the 9 vegetation measures from year to year showed small but real and important improvement. So it was it was not insignificant. It was small, but we are seeing the right trend.
And there are some photos of this, but is it fair to assume that they took photos of the plots when they sort of did their work?
Those are our photos from
Okay.
the vegetation surveys. Yeah.
I have a couple comments / questions. From a researcher point of view, I mean, I'm literally giving a lecture tomorrow on data analysis. This is what I do. Let's start on you used the word significant several times. So, but I didn't see any evidence of any regressions being run to see if there was if the changes are significant. In other words, when you have an outcome variable, in this case, whether things are growing or not, and you have many, many, many other variables, right? Like you were talking about that it was drier or whatever. And I noticed in the report, well, that's the other second. It's like the numbers moving don't mean anything unless they're statistically significant, meaning that that when you run the analysis, the reason why the things change is more likely because of the variable you're looking at, whatever that variable is, rather than the other variables or noise, right? So simple example, if you survey 100 people and you're trying to find out whether people, swim, and you say that you have like 12 women swim, but 10 men swim, right? That might be a meaningless finding. You have to run a regression to see if their gender is the reason why there's a difference, a true difference in can swing. It could be, again, noise. It could also be intervening variable that like men in the summertime are less likely to do something and thus they're less likely to swim. So that's an intervening variable. So when you're talking about numbers that are so tiny that are changing, the only, like, you just kept using the word significant. You don't mean statistically significant. Like, we don't know statistically whether that's
No,
anything.
we're just getting started.
It could
with
be
this
noise, it could be
data.
any one of the many other variables.
Sure, there are, yes. And Dr. Begley Miller was the one who ran the analysis. We collected the data. So I'm relying on her analysis. But no, we're only in the first year. We did not expect there to be, you know, a huge change.
Right, but you kept saying that there's been a significant change and it's positive in the right direction, but that's only true if the p-value is low enough that it's statistically significant that these changes happen, right? Again, going back to my swimming example, it sounds like, wow, 2 more women than men, that must mean something, it's the right direction. But statistically, it might be that has 0 meaning whatsoever, that it's like a p-value that's like way over 0.05, which means that it's like, it's just as likely to be something else other than gender that would answer the question. And in this study, again, I'm not assailing the researcher. I'm just saying I did not see any regressions being run here. In other words, it was just like, here are the numbers. So they're just crosstabs. They're saying this is what it was this year, and this is what it was last year, but we don't know statistically whether or not that's significant or not.
So is there a question? Is there something that?
No, I just want to make
you
sure
envision?
I'm not missing anything. Was there a regression run that I don't know about that's not?
The report is the report. There's no other information.
All right. So then I would just say that to use the word significant is a term of art, and there is no significant finding here. You could say there's directional findings, but we don't know what the reason is. It could be noise, it could be intervening variables and things like that. Also data collection. So the doctor, the specialist, I don't know what term to use. I don't want to.
Dr. Begley Miller.
Dr. Begley Miller. Dr. Begley Miller did not do data collection. Right?
No.
So we have volunteers doing this, and we have different sets of volunteers doing it over the course of the 2 years, right?
Dr. Begley Miller performed the survey last year. She trained us, but our training was not included in the data analysis. It was just for learning purposes. This year was
The
volunteers.
survey last year occurred before the deer calling.
That's right. Same time
Yeah.
period in August.
I'm just saying, so that also affects the data collection. And I was really surprised to see that in the report that she wrote under results, one of the citations was to speaking to you. And it's like, these kind of weather things about dry conditions, this is not like a subjective thing that you need to talk to a person about. There are records where we know what the rainfall was. We know what it was compared to last year. This is another one of those independent variables, again, that goes into why you can't say something significant because there are all these other variables. I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's one of the many, right? And I was very surprised to see that in a research report. I'm imagining, I was a 2-time chair of the IRB. I've looked at a million studies, a million proposals for studies and things like that. And to see that was very surprising to me that someone would cite to a human when there is data available, right? It doesn't need to come from, that's not an insult to you.
No, I understand.
Yeah, it's just, if they asked me, it would be just as even stupider. So I'm saying, like there is data for that. So it's like, so to say whether or not the dryness or whatever if you're examining that as an independent variable, that's data that needs to be included in the report. We need to find out. I mean, this is the National Weather Service has this stuff. It's like, this isn't like state secrets. We don't have to go to Moscow and get into the Kremlin together. You know what I mean? So I was very, very surprised to see that in the report.
Well, it might be something that next year, since the weather data isn't going away for what's happened historically, she could take a look at if we think this truly was a factor and if it is a
Right.
factor next year.
Yeah, because that's, I really had a problem with those 2 things that I don't think, I understand you're saying that you're not expecting to see significant changes in the first year. And that's fine. I'm not arguing that point at all. I'm saying is I just wanted to push back a little on what was found, because the word significant is not appropriate here unless there is a statistical test run that I'm not aware of. And that can be run pretty quickly, actually, in modern, like using Python and stuff. It's much easier to do than it was when I was in grad school. Because I'm not primarily quantitative. I've worked in everything, but when I'm left to my own devices, it's much more fun doing interviews and things like that. So I'm getting up at 6 a.m. on Friday to interview somebody in London. So. But yes, I just wanted to, my research expertise, I just wanted to kind of throw that in because I thought it's important.
Anybody else have questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we'll see, what happens when we get the next one.
Well, I just wanted to say, thank you for supporting her, involvement.
Do
The
you,
issues aside, it was very helpful to have her run, continue with the reporting because that's a gap in our.
and presumably this is the way you'd like to do it next year?
Yes. And a question whether, Mitch feels that he would be more comfortable if she were running the vegetation survey too.
Yeah, and you can post, I mean, I'm not,
Well, I
I
mean-
don't get to make that call because I won't be here, but.
Right, well,
but,
neither will he, but
right.
but
Yeah.
it's a point for conversation now.
Consistency of data collection is really important, and I was more pointing to the fact, like, why are we talking to people when there's data available? But the consistency of I mean, it's really hard, and this, I'm not talking about this study, I'm stepping back now as
Yeah.
research. It's really, really hard to come up, to decide whether dependent variables have a causative value when you have lots and lots and lots of variables, right? And there are people who are top researchers because they find ways to take big data sets like the Woods, which is essentially a gigantic data set with tons and tons of variables. And when you choose as your dependent variable, well, there's actually several of them because it's not one growth. It's like growth of this, growth of that. The dependent variable of the seedlings went down, the dependent variable of this went up and everything. It's insane. And it's something that we are just getting around now because we have the computing power now to be able to do these things and stuff. And it's like, and if we're going to spend the money and everything, like I was just disappointed with the quality of the data collection and the data analysis. And I think if we're really going to look at this, and it is the first year and no one was expecting anything the first year. So I understand that. And I'm not arguing that point right now. I'm saying is that this was a substandard evaluation from a data research point of view. From my point of view, as a researcher who does this and has been doing this now for 15 years.
Well, we're certainly open to, I can provide feedback to Danielle, if there's anything, specific that we would like her to do next year and whether there would be a better comfort level with her performing the survey so that, I mean, it is a challenge that I'm not sure who will come out each year to help with the survey. And we talked, as we were out there, we had to keeping it straight and making sure we were, measuring everything and not getting confused what had already been measured. It was, we're human.
And that's
Well,
partly
that's
why.
the problem, right?
Yeah.
We try to avoid the human error as we go through these kinds of research projects.
And
Which
but-
again is not a slight on you guys. You guys should be commended for volunteering. I'm just saying how you go about these things is important to getting data analysis results that actually are helpful.
Also why I asked about the photos, because it could give you an independent check if you
Right.
photographed the plots
Yeah.
in a way that Danielle could later look at it and go, okay, I mean,
Yeah.
there may be something you could do with that. So.
Yeah, the seedlings are so small that it would, anyway, we can
Okay.
definitely discuss it for next year. How to document it.
David, I'm gonna be lenient with you only because you're gonna be a trustee shortly. Normally, we wouldn't have to take comments, but if you want to say something that's on this, go ahead.
David Zweibel.
You know what, do me a favor, push the mic towards him at least, yeah.
Just on that last subject, the decision that we made last year when we authorized this was that the board at that time, as my memory serves me, felt that it was too expensive to hire Danielle
Every time.
to do the
Totally get
whole thing. So as a cost-saving venture, we came to the solution
Yeah.
was we will collect the data, she'll teach us how to do it, and she will analyze it.
Also, in this given year, when we didn't expect dramatic changes, I want her to come back when I should see dramatic changes. And if I don't, then we have to be rethinking it. That's really
At
when
the
her
time,
expertise is useful.
I sort of thought that was a little bit of penny wise pound foolish to do that, and I sort of agree with Mitch. I think it would be better for us getting future grants, for communicating it out to other communities, to have a stronger documentation of what we did. So, if somebody else is looking at this data, or we're trying to authorize more stuff in other locations, that we don't have somebody picking it apart and saying, well,
I mean-
fuzzy data. So I would recommend that the board in the future look at maybe spending the extra money for Danielle. And I don't think we're talking about a fortune here.
No.
Because, it was under
Good news on
$10,000.
December 1, you'll be on the board.
So I just wanted to clarify that that was considered, and the reason we didn't do it is because the board at the time felt
Absolutely
that we
true.
wanted to save the money, at least in this first year.
Okay. Thank you.
And just last thing to say to both of you, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you around the village. I hope to see you in the woods.
Yeah, now you can recruit us for other things.
Yeah.
So you know how to use a chainsaw.
Yes, I do. Have a good evening.
You know how to use a chainsaw and I know how to do data. So
That's
it's like,
perfect.
No,
That's a
it's
good
not.
combination.
It's not, because yours is way more useful. Mine is stupid.
Okay, I'm gonna move to adjourn and I know we're gonna meet with you afterwards. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
A little bit.
I was about to put my sweatshirt on once the cameras were off.
So are there, no, not yet. Okay.
Is my mom on there?
Hold on.
Might be.
Actually, you would have been there. My father called in, like.
He said, is my mom on there?